So hello, I'm Meaghan Patterson, Executive Director of the Alberta Museums Association, and I'm here today speaking with Andy Lowe, Director of Manawa in New Zealand, and our 2020 conference keynote speaker. So every year, as part of our annual conference, we like to conduct an interview with the keynote speakers, and they're often distributed online in advance for people to read through as a bit of a teaser for the conference. So this year, we're having our first ever digital conference, and we've embraced that opportunity to have a video interview and distribute it widely. So before we begin that conversation, though, I'd like to acknowledge that the AMA staff live and work on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux people. And we're very grateful to be able to meet and have this conversation on this place. So Kira, Andy, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I know that the pandemic situation has been evolving lately in New Zealand, and we appreciate that you've taken the time out of your day to have this conversation with us. Our theme this year, as you know, has a focus on organizational sustainability. And given the context of the pandemic and the constantly fluctuating circumstances that we find ourselves in, we really decided to shift that focus on sustainability around transformations that are occurring or perhaps should be occurring in order to help museums make their sustainability journeys more responsive and relevant. So welcome to our conversation today.
Oh, kia ora. Good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'll just introduce myself if that's okay.
Sure.
Kia ora. I ngā matawaka, ngā paimanga, ngā waiawa o Alberta tēnā tātou. Ko tēnei te ringa o te tangata e noho nei ki raro I te marumaru o Tarurua Maunga. E rere te awa o Manawa tū kia tāhunga ārua te kainga o ngā tini whetu ki te rangitāne. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Well, kia ora, Meaghan, thank you so much for inviting me. I want to acknowledge the Indigenous people of Alberta, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux peoples. I'm based in the Manawa tū, on the land of Rangitāne, Iwi Māori, who are the tangata whenua, the first peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand. My wife is Te Atiawa Ngāti Ruanui, Maniapoto, and Ngāti Maru. We have two boys, Niwaniwa and Tahunui Ārangi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you. Okay, to jump into this conversation today, I think that what I'd really like to talk about first is, you know, we've been doing some reading and learning about your work at Te Manawa and your leadership, and how you have truly embraced transformation at the museum, which I think has strengthened both your institution as well as the community in which you reside. So I'm wondering if you are able to give us a bit of an overview of your concept of museum without boundaries or beyond boundaries, and how that drives the work of your team.
Oh, kia ora. Well, I can start off and say that, you know, it's about the team and it's about the community and it's about everyone together. The idea of Museum Without Boundaries is in a nutshell, about partnering with communities, thought leaders, change makers, and supporters, and really to inspire and broker deeper connections between them and our world's tangible and intangible treasures, so that they and we can deliver and create relevant, engaging programs and experiences with, by, and for our communities. It's a long way of saying it, really, that it's about opening up space for people to represent themselves the way they want to be represented. Yeah.
That's great.
That makes sense.
It does. No, that does make sense. And I know that, you know, here in Alberta, we've been doing a lot of work over the years around community engagement and really, like you said, kind of partnering with community members and bringing them into that space. And so I'm curious about how that journey has progressed for you and for the institution, and, you know, how it kind of came to be and how it's evolved over the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is still evolving. It's just such a work in progress, and we have a couple of steps forward, and then we kind of drop back a bit. And you know, it's a journey, and it's really exciting. And we never know what's going to happen day to day. We set up a strategy, you know, with a mission and a vision and values and everything a few years ago, to kind of embed it all and to give it a foundation that we could all work on, and that the community and the, you know, our staff and people could really buy into. And since then, it's it's been a matter of kind of working through all of those pieces and in different ways with our communities, that they can pick little bits of it up and take them into different realms where they can, you know, try to use the space in ways that will be useful to them. So it hasn't been a very straightforward journey or a very you know, linear journey at all, and we're constantly learning. But the intention is to just keep, it is like a flower. It's kind of, the petals close up at night again, and we kind of open them up, you know, and keep opening them up so that people can constantly feel like they're involved with what we do and a part of the thinking for the future. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and I think it's probably something that as you say, all museums and lots of cultural institutions are working on. And I think if you come from a place that I come from, where you have felt possibly outside of the usual paradigm in these places or the usual conversations, then it's an interesting, you know, point of view to start from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That's really interesting what you've said about, you know, you never know what's going to happen day to day, and then the flower petals closing and reopening the next day. And, you know, museums are undergoing a period of massive transition right now, and often struggle in how to approach that. And so I'm curious, how do you help both the staff at your site as well as community members with kind of managing that change and that fluidity? Because a lot of people, I think, sometimes struggle with how do you move forward towards perhaps a vision that you had in mind when things are constantly changing and circumstances are fluid and you're responding to the needs of community?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? It's like we're working in multiple paradigms. And I think with, as you know, we're talking about the colonial environment, these Victorian kind of museum environments that are often, you know, hugely process-based and admin-based, and, you know, have a certain way of working that sort of doesn't often or doesn't necessarily work with communities, you know, and that can be a lot more fluid and a lot more spontaneous, you know, or reactive and responsive to what's going on, and need space to do things sometimes to get their voices heard. So it's really interesting. And I think I've learned, I was just talking to a wonderful staff member before about it, that, you know, for us, it's been, I'm quite speedy, you can probably tell. And what happens is I kind of go, oh, you know, we can do this. And someone comes up to us and goes, oh, let's try this. And I think what's happened sometimes is that we haven't spent, or I haven't spent enough time, you know, discussing these things within the team here, you know, and giving people opportunity who work here to go, oh, actually, that's a good idea. I see what you mean, or I see what the community means. Can we tease that out a bit more? You know, what does self-representation look, for instance, like, you know, to me personally as a staff member, so that I can then add in my valuable life experience and contribution, you know. And sometimes we've run ahead and done these things and gone, well, this is an opportunity. You know, we had a fantastic woman from Massey University, which is a tertiary institution up here in the Manawa too. And she was running, her name's Dr. Kat Pause, and she is a doctor of fat studies up at Massey. And she was having this amazing conference on fat studies here, and we found out about it quite soon before it was supposed to happen. So it was like, right, what can we do? How can we, you know, get this amazing conversation into the community here? And one of our amazing program developers, we call them program developers, was in contact with Kat, and suddenly we had this exhibition happening by this incredible woman called Substantia Jones, who is based in New York and runs something called the Added Positivity Project, which is amazing for getting, you know, for getting people who are fat absolutely accepted in the community and seen as awesome. So so anyway, long story, had the exhibition, but you know, one of the things that I didn't do was really, you know, have those conversations with our staff in ways that they could, you know, really come to grips with it and input into it and see the benefit of it, you know. So we had things happening where we found out that one of the schools was coming through, and somebody had covered up some of the works, you know, some of the photos in the exhibition so that the school wouldn't see it. So those kinds of things, you know. But I think if I had taken a bit more time to work through that with the team, you know, so that's just an example. But I think it's about kind of really spending time and teasing out these things, because we do have really conservative, I don't know about Alberta, but here that, you know, some of the environments are still pretty conservative in our, you know, in our cultural institutions and museums. So to get some of these quite contemporary ways of looking at the world in there, you know, having these deeper conversations is really important. And sometimes we just don't have time because we're running from thing to thing, you know. I get that. And myself personally, being too speedy, this happens all the time. But it really, yeah, it's something that I'm constantly learning about, trying to just, yeah, involve people more, because it's all very well involving the community. But as you say, if we don't have the you know, the staff absolutely who are crucial to all of this happening, then it's really hard going. Yeah. Sorry, that's a long way of answering it.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Thank you. And it kind of actually naturally leads into my next question that I had prepared. So I saw that Te Manawa was participating in the Of By For All program, or had done so, I believe, last year. Or
Yep, a couple of years ago. Yeah.
So Nina Simon's new project. And knowing that program has a focus on inclusion and accessibility, and that many arts organizations across Canada are also keen or already participating in that sort of work. I'm curious as to how that program may have influenced some of or strengthened some of the work that you were already doing at the institution, or how you were able to kind of translate the learning of the staff who did participate to the larger team. So I guess that's where it ties back into what we were just talking about. So essentially how you ensure that these sorts of principles are not only project-based, but kind of embedded across the institution and integrated into everybody's work.
Yeah. Well, I love Nina. I've been following her for years, and we made an application to join the Of By For All mentorship program a couple of years ago. Well, actually, nearly 3 years ago now, I think. And we were successful, and it turned out that we were kind of the only venue in the Pacific to have, you know, to be able to be taken on by them. And we were really excited to be part of that. And one of the things that they said to us during the application process was that they were quite surprised about the numbers of communities who were working with us and doing things here and associated with us and doing amazing things by themselves anyway. And we were just sort of opening the space up. We weren't really, you know, they were just driving their own things, and we were sort of helping a bit, I guess. We realized that, you know, actually there's so much work involved with that. And actually we had this list of communities that we're working with, and we thought, no wonder we're all exhausted, you know, from all the work we've been doing. And yeah, so it was an interesting process. And I guess what happened after that, which this may not be the answer you're hoping for, but what happened was that we realized that actually we were doing so much and our team were exhausted. Could we just pull back a bit and actually not do, you know, because while the communities were, you know, many of the communities were happy with what we were doing, the staff were kind of exhausted and needed some time to kind of process as well and get some systems in place. So we kind of went a bit backwards actually after joining Of By For All. You know, so it's an interesting time for us. We're kind of getting back into it now, and I think my big challenge and our big challenge as the leadership team too is to do it, you know, integrate things in a process-based way. You know, I think my thing was raging against the machine, having, you know, process not being my favorite thing anyway, to be honest. I'm not so good at it. You know, getting people, okay, fine, let's get the processes sorted so people are happy at work. Let's do that, you know. And we can embed the vision and get everybody's thinking into that, and the Of By For All thinking, which is the total foundation of our concept anyway, and do it in a way that's going to, you know, sort of give the staff, you know, make the staff feel good, really. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at, and I feel like we're just getting into that now, building a bit more trust and trying to, you know, get the staff involved in the decisions we make, rather than the imposition of let's just do everything with community. That I think they felt was, you know, really, really hard going. And they're amazing. A lot of them have such community interests anyway, you know, so that's just a matter of trying to really involve people in ways that suit them in the ways they work as well. And I think, yeah, that's a big learning for me. Sorry, that's a long way of saying that as well, but yeah.
No, that's great. I think it brings up such a good point, because I know, you know, so many people who work in our sector are so keen to take on, you know, new projects or new ways of working with community or new ideas. Yeah. And so I think it's this perpetual thing where we want to help and we want to do more. And then, you know, you do have to be cognizant of where you reach your limit and where you need to pull back and reevaluate and then move forward again. Right.
Yeah.
When you're ready.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Very common, I think, across our sector. That kind of.
I mean, and the thing, you know, at the foundation, we still have a small group of the team who are driving, you know, who have the Of By For All mentorship program going still. And we were lucky enough to get it for a second year, and the team are committed. The team members change, you know, depending on who's sort of, who's available and who's keen to drive it forward and who has energy to do it. But you know, as I said before, the foundation is the same or very similar to what we're trying to do. And so it really is like a little crucible that keeps the chemicals boiling in it, you know, that we're, it's just boiling there. And at any one time, it can, you know, turn into a giant, beautiful fire that will, you know, warm the whole organization. So yeah, it's just keeping going, and it's a fantastic thing. And I just can't speak more highly of Nina and all the work they've been doing there. It's amazing. Yeah.
So if I was to kind of shift topics a little bit, I know you told us at the AMA a little bit about some of your latest work at the museum and working with Indigenous communities and how they're, you know, running their work in the ways that they best see fit within the museum. And you mentioned this concept of absolute sovereignty and how that helps the museum become kind of a really trusted and inclusive anchor in the community. Are you able to talk to us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my point of view, it's the Māori concept of tino rangatiratanga, which is so much meaning, but one way to look at it is absolute sovereignty. So that means that well, at least from my point of view, it means that the people will represent themselves in ways that they want to be represented. And that has always been tricky, as we know, for museum spaces to actually make that happen. And it's a work in progress. You know, I know at Te Papa, the team are hugely invested in the bicultural model and how we work with Māori to make sure that they are totally represented and representing at all levels. And, you know, one of my intentions was always, I was hoping that there could be, you know, at least 50% Māori staff there. And I don't know how or if that could happen, but it would be amazing. And I think those are things that we constantly think about in museum spaces here anyway, and how to do that. And I think that the struggle with particularly Māori working in organisations, you know, is that they are, as we know, working in these colonial environments that are oppressive, you know, where their taonga, their treasures were stolen and taken, and these are places that the museums, you know, are holding these items. So how to move ahead in that area is, you know, is a really tricky space. I mean, it's also really exciting. For me, it's simple. It doesn't seem to be that simple for a lot of people, including process and bureaucracy, but the idea of handing, or at least opening up the space for tangata whenua, for those people to have themselves and to run it in ways they want to run it. And that's really, you know, to me it's simple so that the people can do it themselves. And we are working on something that's going to be hopefully coming to fruition. That's around that at the moment. It's, I can't talk hugely more about it, but that is, you know, for the iwi to run and do things they want to run. The question for me always is about how, you know, when museums create exhibitions or events or those sorts of things, there's a certain template often, you know, this is the way we do things, these are the types of graphics, this is the amount of text we need and whatever. And I think with communities, you know, as you know, people doing things in their own ways, there's going to be tension between what maybe museum staff or what expectations are, you know, about what that thing will look like, that community will present. And we have to be just constantly opening the petals about that idea too, because these things, you know, are open to huge amounts of different sorts of ways of interpreting, you know, people's own ways of doing things. And I think having these open spaces to do that is constantly challenging, you know, museum people, you know, sort of serial museum workers. I mean, I'm one, you know, to go, all right, okay, fine, it can be different. We can do this. This thing doesn't have to look like this anymore. It can look like this, you know, and it's a fantastic place to be in, really. It's quite mind-blowing, you know, that, you know, you can have a rocket blowing through the roof. You don't, why do you need that roof, you know, really? You know, I don't know. Yeah, so that's kind of exciting. And I think that's a shift in thinking, you know. Yeah, but it is about trying to include people and make sure that they are part of, because if we're doing things where those people, for instance, the tangata whenua, have their own space to do their things, then we still are not absolving ourselves on the other side from learning, from, you know, making sure we're aware of, you know, Treaty of Waitangi that we have here, issues around, you know, learning te reo Māori, for instance, you know, being proper partners. We can, opening up the space and handing over the space doesn't mean that we absolve all responsibility for all of our, you know, the fact that we took over this, you know, Pākehā took over this land and caused huge and terrible grievances for the tangata whenua of this land. You know, so we have to be responsible for that. And museums are in a good place to try and make that change. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at there anyway.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I'm wondering, I mean, first, I love that you continue to use flowers and petals and opening as analogies. I think that's a really great way. It's a kind of a great way to talk about the growth and the process and all of that stuff. And again, knowing that there are so many institutions in Alberta and Canada who are also actively pursuing that kind of work within their own sites and their own communities, you know, just, it sounds like you have done great and deep work in terms of building these relationships and moving forward with this work, and wondering, you know, as many Alberta museums are also either beginning that journey or well within that, if there's any kind of lessons learned, I guess, that you might be able to impart.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, firstly, I don't think we have built deep enough connections. I think I'm not hard enough on some of our Pākehā processes. You know, I should have said, right, you know, we're opening this space up, people, we want to use it, this space, this way. And, you know, and we need to have 50% Māori staff. You know, it should have been harder on all these things. But I didn't realise that there was so much, in a way, resistance, or still is, in the wider community for some of these things. And some of these things I thought were just a given, that we had organised, you know, been talking about this thing for a few years now. And I didn't realise that there were then a whole lot of processes that I should have put in place to ensure that everybody actually understood that, Pākehā people understood that that was actually a thing, that actually meant something. So yeah, so sometimes it's clarifying and working in with you know, with the people who are in power to make sure that they totally get it, and that it's in black and white. I think, you know, that's where it's got to be in quite a detailed way. Business cases and whatever else, you know, just make sure that it's absolutely concrete rather than sometimes just talking about things in small snippets, in various documents. We'll go, yes, we're going to do this and we're having this, but probably the thorough process would have been a very probably bureaucratic and admin-based process that it's not my forte either. So, so making sure it's really concrete is hugely important. And I don't know whether the question is always about, and it's a challenge for myself too, asking the question, what do iwi, what does the iwi, what does the tribe want, or the tribes want? What is it that they want in these spaces? Do they want to have their own space? Do they want to be part of it or not? Or do they want to be, do they want to have more staff, more of their own tribal peoples in the staff system, the current museum system, or they want to have a separate system, or do they want to change the system, change the current museum system? So there's lots of, but it's kind of about questions, and I need to get better at that. And we, some of us need to get better at the questions rather than, because there's a fear about not knowing things, isn't there? So probably not asking the questions. So it really is about what the Indigenous peoples want. And if it works for them, the system, then that's the first thing, I think. Yeah. But I mean, for me, it is really about inclusion and trying to at least have people in the conversations and really opening up the space for them to take over if they want to. If they want to take over half or some of the museum or whatever part of it, then that's the opportunity to have the conversation about how do you want to do it differently, I think, and use it as your own space to do whatever you want in is the thing. And then it's conversations around how to do that in working within a paradigm that is kind of still a colonial Victorian kind of paradigm, too. So yeah, that's probably about asking questions, being concrete, making sure the processes are nailed down, and then you can build trust from there, I think. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense?
I think so. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Lots of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think that you ended that on kind of how do you want to do things differently? How do people want to do things differently? And I guess just to kind of bring us back to where we started in our conversation, and just recognizing the fact that we are in the middle of a global pandemic and you and I are on opposite sides of the world, and that we find the museum sector kind of taking a moment to reflect on who they are and who we need to be moving forward. I'm wondering, and not to really put you on the spot, but when you think about how do people want to do it differently, how would you want to see things differently? Is there something that the last 6 months has kind of brought to the forefront for you or for your institution as a moment of, okay, this is something that we need to look critically at or think differently about and as we move forward?
Yeah. Well, I guess my mind is always, goes towards imagination and how to really bust open the idea of a museum and start again with these places, and how to, really get I keep coming back to the community's ideas, multiple communities' ideas on how they want to make museums useful. How is this museum going to be useful for you, for the things you need right now, and that might be, human connection, human touch. I don't know, whatever those things are that people are saying. I think the UN's been talking about, connection being the big thing, and loneliness. How they've got their Ministry of Loneliness in England now. That's incredible. So for me, it's spine tingling stuff. If there's spaces that are big spaces that people can, some of these spaces are big, some of them not. Ours are particularly big, but the idea that people can do things in spaces where they can still get social distancing, and connect with people in ways that they are working on, social change, human rights issues, whatever those things are, environmental concerns, Indigenous rights, all those things where communities' voices are often not, or often in spaces that are not so public. You know, this is our perfect opportunity to use Museum Without Boundaries concept, because it's all about how people can connect with each other and become more visible if they want to, you know, to each other. And, you know, literally different sorts of people, you know, celebrating that difference, and different sorts of people rubbing up against each other in these spaces is such an opportunity. And whether we do it, you know, through, you know, people getting together or online, I don't think it's a problem. People, obviously, the physical connection is huge, but online you can still do these amazing things where people are feeling listened to and heard and not so invisible, you know. As we know, the whole, you know, mental health thing is skyrocketed, and people, you know, having these spaces to kind of connect with each other. We've had a couple of projects recently where they were fast-tracked because they were going to happen anyway, because we run a program called Noa, which is basically the opposite of tapu. Tapu is the word for sacred, and so Noa means for everybody. And a program where we run, co-create a program. People with disabilities have an open art studio here in the main kind of entrancey area of Te Manawa, and they co-create an art studio with us. And they've been working on videos that they sent in of their own experiences during lockdown, of the 2 months of lockdown we had, and kind of connecting with each other that way. So they don't necessarily have to be physically together, but they've been connecting with each other, and also us and other people in the communities around those things. So yeah, I think it just puts connection into a whole new, you know, into the stratosphere really for us now, you know, the opportunity to do that. And museums have so many communities. I'm sure you're all, you know, you've got lists and people, and, you know, lists of different people you're working with, and it's such a fantastic time, really, in a way. Terrible for so many, and such a creative opportunity for those who, you know, who see it that way. So it's just, I think it's all about opening the doors, honestly, and keep opening them and going, you know, how can we be useful for you right now, for, you know, for your pain and for what you're going through. We've got the Manawa Lesbian Gay Rights Association is based, it's the oldest in the country in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's 45 years old now. And it's based at Te Manawa, and it moved in here. The organisation kind of philosophically moved in here a few years ago. And we've been running various things here over the years with Melgra. We call it Melgra. And recently, my partner started working at an organisation called Inside Out, which works with rainbow LGBT communities or young people in schools. And, you know, they were feeling, some of the kids at schools, secondary schools, are feeling quite anxious about the COVID thing at the moment. So combination of Melgra, the Manawa Lesbian Gay Rights Association, and Inside Out ran a tour around the museum the other day, quite spontaneously in a way. We didn't have a lot of preparation time for the kids, you know, and so they came in to do that here. So it's something, you know, it's a kind of useful space for them, because they needed a space to be, you know, to be in a public space that was kind of safe, that was fairly open, had good social distancing potential, you know, and we could bring out these incredible objects from our collection, often still invisible, you know, it's not like you can see them on the walls much, but, you know, our amazing collection manager got this, you know, LGBT rainbow kind of based or themed, you know, stories out of the collection for the group, and they were kind of, it was fantastic, really. You know, the whole combination of that experience, and that was quite spontaneous, but it meant that we became a useful space for those young kids, you know, who are going through some massive things at the moment in terms of their identities, obviously, but they also, you know, they're really worried about COVID thing, and they could feel kind of, you know, they were kind of warm, really. They felt warm, and they felt that they weren't invisible in this public kind of fairly conservative place. So anyway, that's just an example, but I kind of think it's about being useful to people at the moment, whatever they need. Yeah.
No, that great examples, great stories. And I think you're right. It's about how we as a sector and institutions can be useful to people as they need like you said, to be warm, welcoming, safe spaces for everyone. So I think those are fantastic examples. So I think those are all the questions I had for today, unless there's anything else that you wanted to chat about in advance of your talk in a couple weeks' time.
Great. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in how, you know, your museums, as you said before, working in that space with the Indigenous peoples and how that's going in terms of the decolonisation process and, you know, all of the return of taonga objects to the various tribes. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting to hear about that as well.
Absolutely, and I do know that we have some sessions at this conference and have as well at previous that'll kind of touch on some of those issues too. So yeah, you'll get to learn more then. But yeah, I'd like to really thank you for taking this time this afternoon and, or this, I guess it's morning still for you, my apologies. And to say that, you know, we look forward to hearing you speak again in a couple weeks time at our conference, and just thank you for just sharing so candidly and being here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Nō reira, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora.